Good morning. Today is Thursday,
Morning.
January 13th. This is a meeting of Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee, and we will resume our review of bills and topics, picking up today on a bill that will be Council will be doing a walkthrough for us. It follows up on our previous discussions on Act 250. The bill is S234, and as a sponsor, I'll say just by way of explanation, I think there have been a number of issues we've tried to move forward in this committee in Act 250, and they got wrapped in bills that ultimately earned a veto. So we have been unable to make progress in some important areas, including forestry and forest health. So that's one of the drivers for this. The other piece I'd just say at the outset is we are always under pressure to facilitate development, particularly smart growth. And some people will assert that Act 250 is an impediment to doing that kind of development. I'm not sure, I think that's certainly subject to debate. Senator McCormick's brought forward a proposal that seeks to address that claim. This bill takes an alternative approach to addressing that same claim as well. So it's kind of a perennial sticking point, and we'll get introduced on the bill. And then I think we're going to have an interesting discussion in the weeks ahead as we really try to separate fact from fiction on the impacts of Act 250 and how it does or does not support development. But there's other things beyond the development question, which is maybe the thorniest, and that includes issues near and dear to this committee, namely forest health. So with that, I'd like to turn to Council to get a walkthrough of S234, please.
Good morning. Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. I am here on S234. It is posted on your website today, and I will share my screen. To take a step back, this committee, we did work on Act 250 issues in H926 last biennium, but related to that, before that, back in 2018, there was the Commission on Act 250, the next 50 years. Senator McCormick was a member, as well as Senator Campion. And so a lot of there have been multiple Act 250 bills since then in an attempt to adopt some of the work that commission spent 18 months working on. So some of the language in this bill should be very familiar to you. You should have seen a lot of it before. There are some new things in here, but also the first section is a section directly related to the work the commission did and actually was originally proposed by them. And so it should look a little familiar, but this committee hasn't discussed it in a while. So let me share my screen and then we'll talk about it. Whoops, not that one. Okay.
There it is.
Okay,
Perfect.
good. All right, so to start, in the purpose section, there is the list of all the elements of this bill, of which there are quite a few. So this bill is going to include the creation of a new designation as part of the state designation program called smart growth areas. And smart growth areas, towns that are able to adopt that designation will be exempt from Act 250 for developments within the smart growth areas. This bill will also include providing grants to municipalities to assist them in achieving this new designation. It requires municipalities to respond to Act 250 requests within 90 days. There's new criteria for forest blocks and connecting habitat that this committee has worked on a number of times. It adds a jurisdictional trigger for roads, adds language related to permit conditions for wood product manufacturers, clarifies Act 250 jurisdiction in 1 acre towns. And then there's a study committee at the end to look at Act 250 governance issues. So on page 2, the first section, the first few sections of this bill relate to this new smart growth designation program. So this was a proposal that came out of the Commission on Act 250. It was called enhanced designation in their recommendation. And so it's slightly different, but it's a very similar concept, and a lot of the language is the same as was proposed by the Commission 3 years ago. So to start, Section 1 adds a definition to the Act 250 definition section of smart growth designation. It means the process by which a designated center demonstrates that the center has satisfied the requirements of 24 VSA 2793F, and the term refers to the resulting status as well. And so I'm going to read you that the language of this designation in a moment, but it's we're adding this into Act 250 as well. Section 2 adds an exemption for smart growth areas. No permit or permit amendment is required for any subdivision or development located in a smart growth designation area. If the smart growth designation is terminated, a development or subdivision within the designation must receive a permit if applicable. So now we're going to talk about the specifics of the smart growth designation. So here we have 24 VSA 2793F. Application and approval. A municipality, by resolution of its legislative body, may apply to the Natural Resources Board for a smart growth designation for any designated downtown development district or designated neighborhood development area. So those are two designations that currently exist as part of the state designation program. I think most of you are familiar with them, but designated downtowns are a small area around the core commercial center of a town. And then the designated neighborhood development area is the area around a core designation that does include more residential, but it is immediately adjacent to the core designation, but it is largely a residential area.
And if I, sorry to interrupt,
no, go ahead.
We're going to look at quite a few details right here in the coming pages. And let me just interject a rationale, high-level perspective for what we're about to go through. So part of the impasse on Act 250 is, my sense is good planning is good planning, regardless of where it is executed. That could be municipally, regionally, or at the state level through Act 250. And so the notion, I don't know how the Commission on Act 250 the next 50 years expressed it, but the way that I would express it about what the goal of this section we're just starting to look into is, if we can have planning as good as demanding as robust as Act 250, but it's actually administered at the local level, then and that solves the impasse question, then maybe that's an answer. So that's what we're about to go through. Thank you.
All right. So a municipality applies to the Natural Resources Board. The Natural Resources Board shall issue an affirmative determination on finding that the municipality meets the requirement of the subsection B of this section. So here are the requirements that the Natural Resources Board will look at. Smart growth designation requirements. To obtain a smart growth designation under this section, a municipality must demonstrate that it has each of the following: an approved designated downtown development district or designated neighborhood development area, a municipal plan that is approved in accordance with 4350 of this title, a housing element in its town plan that's required under 4382 of this title that achieves the purposes of 430211. So that's, do they have a house within their town plan? Is there a housing element that complies with the requirements of Chapter 117? And that includes clear implementation steps for achieving mixed income housing, including affordable housing, for a timeline for implementation, responsibility for each implementation steps, and potential funding sources. The municipality has adopted one of the following to promote availability of affordable housing opportunities in the municipality: inclusionary zoning, a restricted housing trust fund with designated revenue streams, a housing commission as provided in 4333, impact fee exemptions or reductions for affordable housing as provided in 5205. So those requirements are all related to making sure the town has clear requirements related to promoting or incentivizing affordable housing within these areas. Now I'm on page 4. The town also shall have municipal flood hazard planning applicable to the entire municipality in accordance with the statute and in accordance with the guidelines issued by the department pursuant to 2792 of this title. So making sure that they have flood hazard planning within the town. Also, flood hazard and river corridor bylaws applicable to the entire municipality that are consistent with the standards established in Title 10 for flood hazard areas and river corridors. A capital budget and program pursuant to 4330 of this title that makes substantial investments in ongoing development of the designated area, are consistent with the plan's implementation program, and are consistent with the smart growth principles defined in 2791 of this title. Municipal bylaws that do not include broad exemptions, excluding significant private or public land development from requiring a municipal land use permit. So the town should not include broad exemptions for land use permits in order to use this designation. Adequate municipal staff to support coordinated comprehensive capital planning, development review, and zoning administration. So those are the requirements. Oh, and we're still in the requirements section on page 5. So designated downtowns seeking this designation shall include the requirements of page 3, but also urban form bylaws for the enhanced designated center that further the smart growth principles of this chapter and adequately regulate the physical form and scale of development and conform to the guidelines established by the department. And historic preservation bylaws for established design review districts, historic districts, or historic landmarks pursuant to subdivisions 4414 of this title for the enhanced designated center that meets state historic preservation guidelines issued by the department. So 2 things. There's a couple of typos on this page. This is no longer being called enhanced designation. It should be called smart growth designation. But also, I did want to point out this section is hinting at that the Department of Housing and Community Development, currently they are largely involved in the administration of the state designation program and publish the guidelines for the applications for designation program. So that is the department that's being referred to here. So down on line 13, designated neighborhood development areas seeking the designation shall have in addition to the requirements of the subsection, wildlife habitat planning bylaws for the designated center that comply with standards established by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. If any party entitled to notice under subdivision 4A of this subsection, or any resident of the municipality raises concerns about the municipality's compliance with the requirements for the underlying designation, those concerns must be addressed as part of the municipality's application. So, so we just went through the list of requirements. Now we're going to shift more to the application, but this is providing opportunity for parties or residents to raise concerns about a municipality's application for this.
Can I pause and ask a question? So how close to the proposal, other than the name is different, the enhanced designation structure that commission on Act 250, next 50 years, how closely does it follow that language? I know that the name is smart growth designation is different, but.
Well, I don't know.
Okay.
When you and I were working on this,
yeah,
you did have a number of additional elements that you were interested in, particularly the affordable housing component.
Right.
So there are additions that you requested to the proposal.
Sure.
So I think it would be fair to say that the sponsor of this bill built on the prior proposal.
Yeah. Okay.
But I haven't done a side by side recently.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator McCormick.
Yeah, Senator Campion and I both served on that commission. Full disclosure, at the time we were finalizing the report, I was experiencing severe complications from a simple surgery, knee replacement, but I was going into serious complications from surgery and was not really able to fully understand what we were doing. And if I were to answer your question about the differences, in any case, I'd want to have text in front of me rather than doing it just from memory 3 years later. But this strikes me as very similar to what our report recommended.
Well, so thank you. And we can do that. Although I don't know that we, it's a somewhat academic exercise at this point, but the point for me was to be building on something that came out of work already done, as opposed to starting from scratch. The other thing too, I just want for us as a committee, because I think we're all keenly aware of the housing shortage in the state and also the lack of affordable housing. So that's called out very explicitly in this bill, but Economic Development, General Affairs and Housing Committee, I've been in regular conversation. Actually, I have a noon meeting with Senator Sirotkin today. So the housing is usually something that they would lead on. And so we're trying to figure out how to have complementary work going on in the two committees. I think we all have a shared goal of well-developed, smart growth that includes housing. And which part of the lift each committee does is a work in progress at the moment. But I want to acknowledge that we're getting into some detail on something that we don't always talk about directly. So with that, I'm going to quiet down and ask council to take back over again. Thanks.
Okay, so on to page 6, process for issuing a smart growth designation. A pre-application meeting shall be held with department staff to review the program requirements. This is what currently happens for all the other designations. The department staff assist municipalities with their applications. The meeting shall be held in the municipality unless another location is agreed to by the municipality. An application by the municipality must include the information and analysis required by the department's guidelines established pursuant to 2792 on how to meet the requirements of this section. The department shall establish a procedure for submission of a draft application that involves review and comment by all the parties to be noticed in subdivision 4A of this subsection, and shall issue a pre-application memo incorporating the comments to the applicant after receipt of draft preliminary application. After receipt of a complete final application, the Natural Resources Board shall convene a public hearing in the municipality to consider whether to issue a determination of smart growth designation. So small difference. So currently all of the other state designation programs. So the Department of Housing and Community Development assists a town in making their application for state designation. But the difference here is that currently applications go to the State Designation Board. And so that is a distinct board. This is having the application go to the Natural Resources Board, which is slightly different. They don't currently do anything like this, but it's relevant to the fact that they will be deciding whether a municipality has adopted all the bylaws and programs that would allow them to be exempt from Act 250 in these areas.
So thank you, Council, for flagging that. And that distinction is very intentional in terms of if we're talking about a program that's as robust as Act 250, but just administered and through this kind of alternate pathway, bringing the application back before the NRB is the bill's attempt to make good on that level of scrutiny.
So now we're in the notice provisions at the bottom of page 6. At least 35 days in advance of the board's meeting, the department shall provide notice to the municipality and post it on the agency's website. The municipality shall publish notice of the meeting at least 30 days in advance of the board's meeting in a newspaper of general circulation and deliver physically or electronically with proof of receipt or by certified mail to the Agency of Natural Resources, the State Downtown Board, the Division for Historic Preservation, the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, the Agency of Transportation, the Regional Planning Commission, the Regional Development Corporations, and entities providing educational, police, and fire services to the municipality. So all these entities are getting notice that there's going to be a hearing on the application. The notice shall also be posted by the municipality in or near the municipal clerk's office and at least 2 other designated public places in the municipality and on the websites of the municipality and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. The municipality shall also certify in writing that the notice has been published, delivered, and posted within the specified time. No defect in the form or substance of any of these requirements shall invalidate the action of the board when reasonable efforts are made to provide adequate posting and notice. However, the action shall be invalid when the defective posting or notice was material misleading in content. If an action is ruled to be invalid by the Superior Court or by the board itself, the department shall provide and the municipality shall issue new posting and notice, and the board shall hold a new hearing and take new action. The board may recess the proceedings on any application pending submission of additional information. The board shall close the proceedings promptly after all parties have submitted the requested information. The board shall issue its determination in writing. The determination shall include explicit findings on each of the requirements in subsection B of this section. So then there's a review of the status. So the length of the designation. Initial determination of smart growth designation may be made at any time. Thereafter, review of the smart growth designation shall be concurrent with the periodic review of the underlying designated downtown and neighborhood development area. So this is on top of an existing state designation program, and all of those state designation programs, including the downtown and NDAs, have regular review. I believe they're every 8 years. For their formal review. And so there may also be a 4-year check-in, and I can double check that for you in the statute after this. The board on its motion may review compliance with the smart growth designation at more frequent intervals. If at any time the board determines that the designated smart growth area no longer meets the standard for the designation, it shall take one or more of the following actions. Require corrective action within a reasonable time frame, or terminate the smart growth designation. If the underlying designation is terminated, the smart growth designation also terminates. So if for some reason a town loses its downtown designation or NDA designation, they also lose their smart growth designation. Appeal. An interested person may appeal any action or decision of the board under this section to the Environmental Division of the Superior Court within 30 days following the act or decision. As used in this section, interested person means one of the following: a person owning a title to or occupying property within or abutting the designated center, the municipality making the application or a municipality adjoining the municipality making the application, the Regional Planning Commission for the region that includes the designated center, or the Regional Planning Commission whose region adjoins the municipality, any 20 persons who by signed petition allege the decision is not in accord with the requirements of this chapter, and who own or occupy real property located within the municipality in which the designated center is located or an adjoining municipality. The petition must designate one person to serve as the representative of the petitioners regarding all matters related to the appeal. The designated representative must have participated in the public hearing described in the section above. So that is the new designation program being proposed. Many of the requirements in the list of requirements for smart growth designation address some of the criteria of Act 250. As you know, the 10 criteria of Act 250 have a lot of sub-criteria, but the long list of criteria for smart growth areas is attempting to match as many of them as possible, so that the town's permits will address those criteria.
And I'll just say, in terms of construction of this section, I did contemplate having the NRB actually write model bylaws. That was one of the things we discussed during the development period of this bill. But because the state is receiving ARPA money, and some of that is going to be supporting housing, and there's a time clock running on ARPA funds being expended, rather than kick off a process at the NRB to draft model guidelines or bylaws, we took the approach of the work, founding this on work already done by the commission and putting it into statute, so that we start with a whole process from the beginning, which may pare something like a year off the process. It would let towns, upon passage, towns could be, some towns that are quite well along might be able to make a successful application in short order. Other towns would have more work to do. But so in the background, there is a concern that whatever process we move forward, that it provide for timely development, because we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to bring in ARPA money and apply it to these housing projects. So that's just another piece of the thinking behind what you're seeing here today. Thanks.
Okay, so section 4. Section 4 adds another member to the state designation board. It adds the executive director of VHCB to the state designation board. So currently there are 11 members on the state designation board. I don't have the list in front of me. It's mostly agency members, but that is the entity that review applications for all of the other designation programs.
I would say that's a housekeeping item left over from a prior year, because now we're not relying on that board, the downtown designation, the downtown board, to do the work in the section before.
Section 5 amends 4306 and Title 24. This is the section on the Municipal and Regional Planning Fund. I spoke about this fund earlier this week with this committee. I think it was this week. Regarding, this is the fund that's made up of money from the property transfer tax. Currently, part of that funding goes to municipalities to assist them. It provides grants to municipalities to assist them in adopting bylaws. and doing planning for the town. So this is adding new language on page 11. So new funds allocated to municipalities under this section may take the form of special purpose grants in accordance with section 4307. And so here's the new language in 4307, municipal smart growth designation grants. There are created municipal bylaw modernization grants to assist municipalities in updating their land use and development bylaws to achieve the smart growth designation under 2793F of this title. The grant shall be funded by monies allocated from the Municipal and Regional Planning Fund that we just talked about in the prior section, and all other monies appropriated. On to page 12. A municipality that receives a grant shall use the funds for the adoption of bylaws that are required under 2793F to achieve the smart growth designation. Funding may be used for mapping, the cost of regional planning commission staff or consultant time, carrying out the provisions of subchapters 5 through 10 of this chapter, and any other purpose approved by the department. Disbursements to municipalities shall be administered by the department through a competitive process, providing the opportunity for all regions and any eligible municipality to compete regardless of size. The department shall, to the extent reasonably possible, ensure the grants are awarded with the intent of achieving geographic distribution across the state. On or before September 1, 2022, the department shall adopt guidelines to assist municipalities applying for grants under this section. So this is just establishing a new type of grant that towns can apply for to come into compliance with the requirements of the smart growth designation so that they can achieve that designation.
So my editorial comment on this one would be that, if we go this route, we want people to succeed and do the work well. And if one of the limitations on them being successful is a lack of funds that allow them to carry out the duties and obligations that would be entailed by gaining the designation, let's help them do that work. And so that's what the technical assistance and grant money is for.
Okay, so now we're changing topics. We're done with the smart growth designation part. So section 7 adds new language. We're in Act 250 to section 6086. So there's new language that reads, if a municipality fails to respond to a request by an applicant within 90 days as to the impacts related to subdivision 6 and 7, excuse me, the application will be presumed not to have an unreasonable burden on educational, municipal, or governmental services. All right, so we're in Act 250. The criteria 6 and 7, that's what we're talking about here. 6 is educational services. So part of an Act 250 application is whether there will be an unreasonable burden on educational services. And criterion 7 is municipal or governmental services. So often a applicant asks the town directly for this information. And so this is requiring that if a municipality does not respond to an applicant asking for this information within 90 days, there's a presumption that there isn't an unreasonable burden under the criteria.
And that comes out of conversations this committee has had in the past with the developer community that said, we haven't heard from the municipality and the clock is running, and for them, the clock is running means money. So it's a timely response mechanism. Senator McDonald.
So, the unreasonable burden on education, that burden doesn't fall on the towns that practice smart growth. The unreasonable burdens are the towns in the countryside that lose students when people move to downtown. And they're the ones that would profess to have been subjected to unreasonable burdens. It's kind of a perverse result.
Well, we have a former district commission chair with us at the table. So I don't know if there's another way you would suggest phrasing it, but I think, you
No,
know,
I'm
the
just
idea
saying
was,
I wasn't suggesting phrasing it any differently, but
uh-huh.
you are seeking to bring more children downtown. That's the goal of smart growth. And when you bring them downtown, your property tax rate goes downward, not upward, generally speaking. So sometimes it's the countryside that suddenly has to buy buses and ship kids to downtown.
Is this based on the presumption that, I'm just trying to understand, that the children who would be moving into this area in town that's developing will be drawn out of the countryside as opposed to new residents, or like entirely new to the area? Like, is some game versus adding?
We know that we're losing student population, and when we focus on sending them downtowns, the rural schools become more expensive, and it's more burdensome, and they often have to decide to close and bus their kids to the cities. That's what we are seeking to have happen. And that's considered smart growth, and it probably saves carbon and things like that.
Senator McCormick, I see you. I mean, maybe you have so we have a chair who had to answer this question.
I'm not sure that my experience as a district commission chair gives me any special insights into this. This is more of an education funding issue that Senator McDonald has raised. And that's a double-edged sword. The more kids you get in your municipality, the more kids you have to educate. And that costs money. On the other hand, the more kids you have, the more you get from the ed fund. And the loss of students results in a loss of revenue. So it's sort of a double-edged sword, and it plays out differently in different communities. I'm not sure that I have much to add to the discussion except that.
Well, it's an interesting thing. Maybe we can flag it and come back to this, because honestly, I hadn't really thought of Senator McDonald's good point. It makes me wonder if the criterion is a little out of date because of how we fund education.
Yeah.
At least in terms of how we conceptualize the burden.
Mr. Chair, we are writing legislation for things we think ought to happen, and then we go, oh, but let's make sure that when we're making things change, that they don't change too much in the area of education. You can't worry about both of those things. You are calling for spending to get more kids downtown and less in the countryside, and then we put in language that says unless there's a burden on whatever. Meanwhile, we've got reports on waiting that says schools in the countryside where the population is sparse ought to get more state aid. So these things are all tied together. And when we're asking for people to behave and live in different places and for homes to be built in different places, why do we have language in there that says unless it disrupts things? We are attempting to disrupt things. That's the goal of smart growth, is to disrupt what we are currently doing and to do something else. And then we say in the language, unless it disrupts things.
Okay, well, point well taken. I think we're all flagging our copies, and I think we should read this and sort it out. Thank you. It's always good to have an iconoclastic, sharp-eyed reader in the room. So
that's criterion 6. And Act 250, if anyone wants to flag that for discussion.
All right, so onward. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. So page 13. So now we're in a section related to forest blocks. This language should be familiar to all of you. Your committee has worked on it multiple times, even since I have been here. So this is adding new criteria, a new criterion to Act 250 related to forest blocks and connecting habitat. So first, in section 8, it adds definitions. So it adds definitions of connecting habitat, land or water or both, that links patches of habitat within a landscape, allowing the movement, migration, and dispersal of wildlife and plants, and the functioning of ecological processes. A connecting habitat may include features including recreational trails and improvements constructed for farming, logging, and forestry purposes. Forest block means a contiguous area of forest in any stage of succession and not currently developed for non-forest use. A forest block may include features including recreational trails, wetlands, and other natural features that themselves do not possess tree cover, and improvements constructed for farming, logging, or forestry purposes. And these definitions are the same. They came out of the bills that you have worked on before. Fragmentation means the division or conversion of a forest block or connecting habitat by the separation of a parcel into 2 or more parcels. The construction, conversion, relocation, or enlargement of any building or other structure, or of any mining, excavation, or landfill, and any change in the use of any building or any structure or land or extension of land, of use of the land. However, fragmentation does not include the division or conversion of a forest block or connecting habitat by a recreational trail, or improvements constructed for logging, farming, logging, or forestry purposes below 2,500 feet. Habitat means the physical and biological environment in which a particular species of plant or wildlife lives. So now section 9 adds the new criteria. It is going to be part of criterion 8. So 10 VSA 6086A8. We're adding a subsection name here, so it can be, we can refer to it as something. So ecosystem protection, scenic beauty, historic sites. And in the existing first part of this is the aesthetics criteria. But then we're adding the new language on page 15. Forest blocks and connecting habitat. So here we're talking about an Act 250 permit application. And this is the list of things that an applicant must demonstrate in their application. So an applicant shall demonstrate that a development or subdivision will not result in an undue adverse impact on forest blocks and connecting habitat. If a project as proposed would result in an undue adverse impact, a permit may only be granted if effects are avoided, minimized, and mitigated in accordance with rules adopted by the board. So that is the new criterion 8C. Section 10 directs the NRB to adopt rules on this new criteria. The Natural Resources Board, in consultation with the ANR, shall adopt rules to implement the requirements for the administration of the new criterion 8C. The rules shall include how forest blocks and connecting habitat are further defined, including their size, location, and function, which may include information that will be available to the public to determine where forest blocks and connecting habitat are located, or advisory mapping resources, how they will be made available, how they will be used, and how they will be updated. The rule shall include standards establishing how impact can be avoided, minimized, or mitigated, including how fragmentation of forest blocks or connecting habitat is avoided or minimized, which may include steps to promote proactive site design of buildings, roadways, and driveways, utility location, and location relative to existing features such as roads, tree lines, and fence lines. criteria to identify a forest block or connecting habitat when a forest block or connecting habitat is eligible for mitigation, standards for how impacts to a forest block or connecting habitat may be mitigated. Standards may include appropriate ratios for compensation, appropriate forms of compensation such as conservation easements, fee, interests in land, and other forms of compensation, and appropriate uses of on-site and off-site mitigation. And so we can talk about this at some point in more depth, but this is slightly picturing a model similar to the prime ag soil mitigation that's currently available under Act 250. There are options for on-site or off-site mitigation with a fee being paid. So it's asking the NRB to look at that. The board shall convene a working group to provide input to the rule prior to filing it with ICAR. The board shall convene the working group on or before February 1, 2023. And the board shall file final rule with LCAR on or before June 15th, 2023. Section 11 is an amendment that has been floating around, part of this forest block conversation for a very long time. It's an update to the resource mapping section in Title 10. So it directs the Secretary of A&R to complete and maintain resource mapping based on GIS or other technology. The mapping shall identify natural resources throughout the state, including forest blocks that may be relevant to the consideration of energy projects and projects subject to Act 250. So it's adding that the Secretary can use other technology besides GIS and requiring that forest blocks be included on the resource mapping. And then there's new language. The Secretary shall establish and maintain written procedures that include a process and science-based criteria for updating resource maps developed under this section. Before establishing or revising these procedures, the Secretary shall provide opportunities for affected parties and the public to submit relevant information and recommendation. So that amendment has been with the forest block amendment for years now. So now there is a new section here. Section 12 is on roads. And this language should look very familiar because it came from the work your committee did on roads in the last biennium. So that would have been 2019, 2020. What year is it? 2020, your committee worked on this when you were working on 926. So it's adding a jurisdictional trigger for the construction of roads under Act 250. So I'm going to read the definition, but roads that meet this definition will be required to get an Act 250 permit. So development means each of the following: the construction of a road, roads, driveway, or driveways, which in combination is greater than 2,000 feet, to provide access to or within a tract or tracts of land of more than 1 acre owned or controlled by a person. For purposes of determining jurisdiction under this subdivision, any tract or tracts of land that will provide access that will be provided access by the driveway or road is involved land. As used in this subdivision, road shall include any new road or upgrade of a class 4 highway by a person other than a municipality, including a road that will be transferred to or maintained by a municipality after its construction or upgrade. For the purposes of the subdivision, routine maintenance of a class 4 highway or stormwater improvement required shall not constitute an upgrade. Routine maintenance shall include replacing a culvert or ditch, applying new stone, grading, or making repairs after adverse weather. Routine maintenance shall not include changing the size of the road, changing the location or layout of the road, or adding pavement. For purposes of determining length under this subdivision, the length of all roads and driveways within the tract or tracts of land constructed within any contiguous period of 10 years after October 1, 2020 shall be included. May want to update that date. This subdivision shall not apply to any road constructed for a municipal, county, or state purpose, a utility corridor of an electric transmission or distribution company, or a road located entirely within a designated downtown or neighborhood development area. And it does not apply to a road used primarily for farming or forestry purposes unless used for a residential purpose. So now we're on to another topic, wood products manufacturers. Your committee also worked on this quite a bit as part of H 926. So it adds new definition for wood product manufacturer, a manufacturer that aggregates wood products from forestry operations and adds value through processing or marketing in the wood product supply chain or directly to consumers through retail sales. It includes sawmills, veneer mills, pulp mills, pellet mills, producers of firewood, wood chips, mulch, and fuel wood, and log and pulp concentration yards. Wood products manufacturer does not include facilities that purchase, market, and resell finished goods such as wood furniture, wood pellets, and milled lumber without first receiving wood products from forestry operations. Wood product means logs, pulpwood, veneer wood, boltwood, wood chips, studwood, pullwood, poles, pilings, biomass, fuel wood, maple sap, and bark. So those definitions are then used in section 14. We're in the section on permit conditions. So permit conditions for wood products manufacturer. A permit condition that sets hours of operation for wood products manufacturer shall only be imposed to mitigate an impact under criterion 1, which is air or water pollution, which here largely refers to noise. 5, which is traffic, or 8, which is aesthetics. So a condition for hours of operation can only be for one of those, based on one of those criteria. If an adverse impact under one of those criteria would result, a permit with conditions shall allow the manufacturer to operate while mitigating those impacts. A permit with conditions that mitigate these impacts shall allow for deliveries of wood products from forestry operations to the manufacturer outside permitted hours of operation, including nights, weekends, and holidays, for a number of days demonstrated by the manufacturer as necessary to enable business operations, not to exceed 90 days per year. So this would allow a wood product manufacturer to operate nights, weekends, and holidays for up to 90 days per year, even with their hours of operations condition. Permit conditions on the delivery of wood heat fuels, sorry.
Well, sorry, on operate. So, but here operate just pertains to receiving deliveries, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
A permit with conditions issued to a wood products manufacturer that produces wood chips, pellets, cordwood, or other fuel wood used to heat shall allow shipment of that fuel wood from the manufacturer to the end user outside permitted hours of operation, including nights, weekends, and holidays, from October 1 through April 30 each year. Permits with conditions shall mitigate the undue adverse impacts while enabling the operations of the manufacturer. Permit amendments. A wood products manufacturer holding a permit may request an amendment to an existing permit condition related to hours of operation and seasonal restrictions to be consistent with these subdivisions. Requests for condition amendments under this subsection shall not be subject to Act 250 Rule 34E. And that's the rule that currently sets out the process for how a permit condition can be amended. So it's allowing.
Right.
Yeah.
So since you don't have to go through that more formal 34E process, who could issue the amendment under current law? And what process would they use? Would there be some kind of process?
Right. So it would probably be an administrative amendment. It goes to the district commission like any other permit amendment request. but it wouldn't need to go through the full process required under 34E.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Senator McDonald.
my smart ass question would be, would such exemptions be available only to those people who harvest forests in a sustainable fashion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and had the delivery of their wood products certified to be coming for the forest product come from the actual place in which they say they're coming from? But how did we get into this? On one hand, we're trying to keep forests from being cut down, and on the other hand, we're trying to cut them down faster and make it more profitable to do so and easier to do it. Aren't we got two competing things here? And how did this get into smart growth? Or
Well,
is this a wish list of?
Yeah, so this bill rolls in together more than one request by different parties. So there's been, as you'll recall, previous sessions, the Forest Parks and Recreation and others have brought forward a proposal to try to help this industry, which has some unusual features, so I think, the story we're all familiar with, when you're trying to get a heavy log truck out of the woods and the roads are starting to be muddy, you can go at 3 a.m. in the morning when they're still frozen and get out okay. But if you waited till normal business hours, it would already have melted and it'd be a mess or get stuck or impassable. So that was the reason for providing some flexibility. And then on the other half, the delivery side, because people need fuel when they need fuel, we didn't want people prohibited from making, for instance, an urgent request for delivery because they're running low, just like we do with regular oil.
Thank you for the reminder.
Yep.
Now that doesn't, where you happen to put these things and deliver stuff and take them away from is also that's less important to those other things.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
I'm done.
You're welcome. And I think just by way of reassurance for that sort of implicit question you had, for the permitting, so I'll ask council, for permitting of these facilities more generally, in terms of where they would be placed, for instance, or allowed to be developed, the rest of Act 250 stands unchanged. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on, I'm almost done with the walkthrough. We're on page 22. So another new topic. So this is a topic your committee hasn't discussed at all. It's actually a brand new topic. And I think I'm running, you have another witness coming soon. So we can return to this if you have follow-up questions, but some of you may have heard that the Supreme Court.
Sorry, can I interrupt just to provide us a timing update? So
Sure.
We're fine through 10:15.
Oh, 10:15. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this section is on the jurisdiction, the Act 250 jurisdiction in 1 acre towns. So as I'm sure you're all aware, Act 250 requires a permit for construction of improvements for development or subdivision. And those are usually referred to as the jurisdictional triggers or thresholds under Act 250. For towns that have permanent zoning and subdivision bylaws, commercial development, commercial or industrial, is for projects involving more than 10 acres of land. For towns without zoning, it's 1 acre of land. And this sort of dichotomy has existed since Act 250 started in 1970. However, recently there was a Supreme Court decision that called into question how 1 acre is calculated in a town without zoning. And so the Supreme Court pointed out that the definition for a 10-acre town and a 1-acre town used slightly different words, and therefore, and I'm being very simple in this explanation, and we can go into more depth because I feel like there's probably attorneys out there saying I'm oversimplifying it slightly, but they pointed out that the words used for 1-acre towns is different than 10-acre towns. So this language has an amendment to make sure that those two sections match. So the 1-acre town requirement is changed starting on line 11. So the construction of improvements on a tract or tract of land owned or controlled by a person involving more than 1 acre of land within a radius of 5 miles of any point on any involved land for commercial or industrial purposes within a municipality that has not adopted permanent zoning and subdivision bylaws. So this amendment is intended to reflect the way Act 250 jurisdiction in 1-acre towns has been calculated for the past 51 years and not change it in any way, but to make sure that the status quo is continued.
Right, and I think that the consequences of that ruling, maybe you could just say very briefly what the potential consequence of the ruling on the part of the Supreme Court is, without such a clarification to bring clarity to the original legislative intent.
So the Supreme Court essentially ruled that because the language was different, the calculation of the 1 acre should be based on level of or amount of disturbance by a project as opposed to the size of the project tract. And so under current law, 10-acre towns for commercial purpose, it's always been the size of the tract determines whether or not you need an Act 250 permit. And that has also been true for 1-acre towns. It's been the size of the tract. However, for public projects, for projects that are for municipal, county, state purpose, the calculation is based on the physical disturbance of the land and how many acres are disturbed. So the Supreme Court was suggesting that the 1-acre jurisdiction should be calculated the same way as for municipal and state projects. And it has never been calculated that way. Commercial projects anywhere have been size of the tract. Projects done by the state or municipality, physical area of disturbance. So this is trying to make sure the language matches so that the way that it's always been done continues to be done that way.
Great. Thank you for that helpful explanation. And okay, let's continue on, unless there are committee questions on that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator McCormick.
Yeah, where is the controversy at this point? That decision has been appealed. And is it being challenged in court? Where are we right now?
Yes, a reconsideration of the Supreme Court decision was requested. The Supreme Court did grant a reconsideration. I am not involved. I believe that I don't know specifically if the NRB and I think VNRC is participating, and we can perhaps get an update from them. I heard that arguments were this week, and I don't actually know. So they are proceeding with re-argument of the case, but I don't know if they've started the arguments or if that is coming soon.
Okay, my sense, if I understand correctly, regardless of what any of us think the law says, the law means what the court says it means. But if the law means what the court has said it means in this case, then I for one would think then we ought to change the law so it means what we thought it meant. But procedurally, are we getting ahead of that by considering legislation prior to the adjudication being resolved?
So Senate bills were due on December 10th.
Yeah.
And at that point, I don't think the Supreme Court had actually decided to rehear the case. So, it's true, you may want to watch what the Supreme Court does. I do not, you may want to hear testimony on this. I do not know how often the Supreme Court overturns its own decision in a re-argument. I have no idea how common that is. But were the current decision to stand, there would be a fairly dramatic shift in how jurisdiction is calculated in 1 acre towns, potentially. And so you may want to consider that.
Yeah, no, my sense is the legislature decides what the law is. The court does not. The court interprets the law, the court reads the law, and their understanding prevails. But ultimately, the decision of what we want the law to do is ours. And I'm just wondering if this would be seen as prejudicing the court's decision, or procedurally, are we supposed to wait for the court and then decide whether or not to override them?
I don't know the answer to that, but what I will say is that in land use permit law under Act 250 and 248 and the other types of permits, when an application is submitted and deemed complete by the agency, the law at the time of the complete application is what applies to that application. So this law, if you pass this amendment, would apply to new applications moving forward. So it won't have an impact on the current case before the Supreme Court, but I do think there is a current open question right now that's a little confusing because the Supreme Court has made a ruling that would cause a fairly dramatic shift in Act 250.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't know when or if they will change their decision.
Right.
Okay.
So, Senator McCormick, thanks for that question, and we should keep our eye on that. And we want to always maintain a respectful relationship with the other branches of government.
Yes.
But I think, I'm guessing this committee is probably in agreement that we want to maintain the integrity of the Act 250 process by offering new language that clarifies what I think most of us always believed was, and the way it's been interpreted, the original legislative intent. So we'll keep an eye on it.
I don't have an agenda with this question. I really just want to get a sense of where we stand on it. On the one hand, clearly the legislature should not legislate the outcome of a pending judicial proceeding. But on the other hand, we do determine what the law means. And if we clarify what the law means, I think hopefully it will make the pending case in the court moot. But again, that's a level of legal expertise I don't claim to have.
Right. So any change you make in this law would not make the pending case moot, because it wouldn't apply to the pending case. Okay. It would only apply moving forward.
Right.
So we can move forward appropriately. Right. It would not be inappropriate to move forward.
Right. And if for some reason the Supreme Court does come back with changing its prior decision, you can evaluate whether or not you actually do want to move forward with this language But as I sort of have pointed out, all of the Senate bills were written more than a month ago. So, you know, because of your early deadlines, you may want to consider this.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll flag this one for more interesting things to learn about. And let's keep going because we're getting near the end and we're right on time.
Great. So this last section is just a study committee on the structure and function of the Natural Resources Board. So 8 members of the legislature, 4 from the House, 4 from the Senate. The group shall hear from various stakeholders on how to enhance the administration of the Act 250 program, including consideration of membership of the board, appointment process, grounds for removing a board member, responsibilities and authorities of the board and district commissions, funding the operation of the board, district commissions, and the program, and the handling of appeals by district commissions and the board. The group shall report back on December 31st, 2022, with any proposed changes to the structure and function of the Natural Resources Board.
So just whatever, author's note on this one is we, ever since the environmental board was converted into the Natural Resources Board, I think that's back in 2004, it's had a different role. And there are people that believe that we could improve the functionality of the Natural Resources Board. The governor, you'll all recall, issued an executive order at the beginning of the biennium, which we took testimony on and politely declined to accept. And then we said we would also look into this. So in an effort to honor that request, you know, to address that, we have a study committee. And I think in part because it's been more than 3 years since that commission met. I think times have changed, more things have happened. And then I'll just say, also, I wanted to acknowledge this as a current open area of dispute without burdening this bill and the legislature and trying to resolve what I think is maybe one of the most political pieces of the current Act 250 conversation. Just to be plain about it, no governor that I can imagine, regardless of party, probably wants to have less influence over the Natural Resources Board. So the idea of, and the legislature didn't agree with the governor's proposal of how much influence any governor would have. So rather than get involved in that thorny question on top of other thorny questions, I thought we could acknowledge the problem, ask for a report back and recommendations on those things, and make incremental progress this year on the worthwhile things that are under discussion already in the bill, without aiming for a perfect bill that resolved every major conflict. So depending on your point of view, it's either it's a satisfactory proposal or not, but that's what it's there for, to help a future legislature be in a better posture to address the governance issue. And with that, it's 10:18. So we have, thank you very much, Ms. Chakowski, for the very helpful walkthrough. We will take a break till 10:30. In response to a shared concern in this committee about forestry and forest health, while we have a bill in front of us to help address the trends in the loss of forest land, asked Commissioner Snyder and Mr. Fidel, who are regular witnesses with us on forestry topics, to come in and give us, I wanted to have time to have a real update on where we are on forest land, forest health, loss of forest land. So we're dipping into a little testimony on one of the, I think, most crucial sections of the bill. And we'll do that after our break. So we have 12 minutes till 10:30. I just say the usual reminder, probably want to turn off mics and video.